Hello, my name is Victor Prozapas, and this is my breakthrough story.
Hello, my name is Timothy Zaritskyy, and in this episode of the Breakthrough series, we're going to take a look at the life of Victor Prozapas, owner of a multi-million-dollar franchise of trampoline parks. Going from selling blueberries to becoming a millionaire by the age of 22, this story is one you're going to want to hear. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
This interview had refreshed a lot of things in my mind, and what a great journey it was for myself and the people that surrounds me. So I definitely recommend for people to go back and look for where that moment is for everybody else.
Well, Victor, thank you so much for joining me on the Breakthrough podcast. I know a lot of people might know you as a big investor. They know you own things like this, the trampoline parks. But before we get into this business side and how you got started and all this, I wanted to take it back to the very beginning and what it was like for little Victor growing up. I know you have a little son called Victor. So what was it like for little Victor growing up before you got into all of this?
I think any successful person is going to tell you, hey, you never knew who you're going to be when you are young. Very few people can say, hey, I was dreaming about it and now I become the person that I was dreaming about it. For me, I've never even dreamed to be a businessman. But throughout my young years when I was growing up, when I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old, I was always trying to create the opportunity for myself. You see, because I truly believe you cannot wait for the opportunity. You have to create it. And for me, it was very simple. I would go and pick blueberries, and I would go and sell them on the market. And that's how I was able to make money. And without even knowing, I was introducing myself into the business. The knowledge that I was getting from just dealing with people and, even going picking up cherries at my father's garden, a bucket full, and just going to the market and sell it again. The first thing I realized, hey, I can sell it as a wholesale full bucket, but that would not make as much money if I would just take a jar and just start selling by little jars.
So just these little lessons.
Yes, it would be so much more. And, I was learning little by little without even understanding that I'm learning something. When I came to the United States in 1998, it was just all over again for me because I knew no English. I knew nothing about this country, and I went to high school, 10th grade. And once I went through the high school 3 years, I had nothing that I could say, hey, I am ready for a successful career or anything like that. I didn't go to college, but one thing I learned throughout my young years, that any job that I was doing, that was the most important jobs. It doesn't matter, my first job was in Burger King. Really? Or my second job was in Pizza Hut, or my third job was in Fred Meyer's in Washington State. And every single time when I was flipping burgers, my goal was to do the best I can. That was the most important thing that I have done. Well, then I moved to Pizza Hut, and by the way, to say I was making $4.25 in my first job.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
and there's people trying to get it to $15.
Exactly.
And you were working for $4.
$4.25. And and another part of this whole thing for me, it was savings. I remember like now my first 5 or 6 checks, I never cashed them. I was keeping them, and I remember exactly my first paycheck was $124 for 2 weeks of work. And when I collect that paycheck, I was keeping it for a long time without cashing. So I was saving the money to buy my first car.
Oh, so you're saving up to buy a car?
Yes. But you see, the key is for my success right now, I would say that number one, I was always trying to create that opportunity for myself. Because if I would wait for somebody else to do it for me, the opportunity might never happen. The second thing was, whatever you do, it doesn't matter if you push in carts like I did at Fred Meyer's, which is a big grocery store in Washington State. It didn't matter if I pushed the shopping carts. I was always trying to do the best I could.
That's a very good key to have.
Yeah, and then once I went through that, and then the next thing I went into construction when I was 19, and just imagine from pushing carts and being a cashier, I went into construction, and oh my goodness, that was very painful first days when I was in construction, when everybody's telling me, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And then the next thing that came to me that I learned, and I was able to stick it to myself for the rest of the life, is don't ever let anybody to tell you hurry up on the job site. And when I learned that...
And what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that, when you do something, not only you have to do it the best you can, not only you have to do it, with your whole heart, but do it efficiently and as fast as possible. So when people look at you, they said, okay, you slow, oh, I'm not sure if I want to take you back on a job. You do it as fast, as efficient, as best quality. When people's going to say, question, who we're going to hire? You be the number one.
Without a doubt.
Without that.
So you basically are working as hard as you can, so that you're not even giving them a reason to doubt that you're working hard, and obviously if you're working hard, you're going to do it quickly too.
What I found out with a bunch of other jobs that I had in my life, I made it, clear to myself that said, okay, I should never be afraid to lose a job. I want my employer to be afraid to lose me.
That's a good twist.
Yes, because if I do it other ways, if I will always be worried about my job, then guess what? I could be the first one to let go, because my employer is not going to value me. I wanted to make sure that my employer is going to value me so much that he will do anything possible to keep me.
Do you think that has something to do with not being centered around yourself, but focusing on other people's needs, and knowing that if you focus on their needs first, it'll come back to you?
Definitely, but you also have to remember, like, when you focus on people's gonna let you down. When you focus, and I always tell my employees right now, never focus or never make it personal. So when I do a job, I'm not doing because I am the best person. I'm trying to do the job that will be affecting the policy of the company, or anything I do, it should not be focused on Victor's personality. Because if you focus on your personality, if you're gonna say, hey, I'm gonna pour my heart into it, but then you're gonna lose everything else, such as the policy of the company, or you're gonna lose the way the company asking you to do it, then you're gonna lose the whole focus of it. Because you have to remember, when you leave the position that you keep in, you have to remember that that position has to be at the best shape, and that if you go, the position should stay. And think about it, like the office of the presidency. No matter who comes there, it's an office of the presidency, is highly respected. And so the same thing, if you are pushing carts in a grocery store, you want to make sure that when you leave that position and you go further, that position, everybody's going to say, oh, we remember this guy who was doing this job the best. They might not remember your name, but the work you've done for the company should be remembered.
That's a very interesting key. So you obviously have a couple key lessons that you had already learned at a young age. I mean, at 19 already, and even younger. So taking it back a little bit, when you were growing up, where did you get these lessons? Who were you looking up to learn these things from? Or I assume you didn't come up with them on your own. Were you looking up to somebody when you were growing up, or? Well,
you see, that's the funny story is I always say, hey, if I would knew it then, I would be so much better off today. Because, it's the same thing, like I'm looking at it, and if I would be, let's just say, for example, I'll be 7 years old, and I'm going to start thinking, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to develop a bicycle. And I'm going to start, with all my passions and my power to develop a bicycle. But the bicycle's already there. I just have to learn how to ride it. So sometimes our focus on totally different, and especially the people like, I want to say myself, when I had no idea who I will be in the future. I always say I chase myself 10 years from now.
Oh, okay.
So I always say, hey, Victor is going to be 10 years from now, that's where I'm going to be.
So you're looking up to kind of a created person you already have of yourself,
kinda, yes.
a version.
But you see, like in my past when I was younger, since the first issue was for me was English. So I did not have mentors or anybody to take me through my life. But I'm gonna say something that I should not say. When I was when I was about 16, 17, 18, and at that time I was very, I would say, down in my life, because when you don't have English in this country, it's kind of depressing. And at that time,
You're
I
like
was
secluded. You have nobody to
yes.
talk to.
And at that time, I started playing a video game. And this is a funny story for myself, and I always remind it to myself. And I started playing a video game. I'm not gonna name it, but the video game was all about how to build yourself a kingdom. And I've learned so much business things from it, economical stuff that I had no idea that I learned. When I opened my first business, looking back, I start realizing that I'm implementing the same ideas that I was playing this game, and I was implementing again and again and again without even understanding where it came from. When I start analyzing that, that's where I learned a lot of the things. But at the same time, I want to go back and say, people who's mind driven and say, hey, I want to be somebody, then I want to encourage those people to say, listen, if you know who you want to be, then find people who's already there. Because for me, there was no people that I knew who was a business person. In my whole family, there was not a single business person before me.
One.
Yes. So there was not much for me to learn, especially, like I said, the
YouTube didn't exist
yeah,
either.
Exactly. And you could not ask Google, hey, Google, how to write the contract. You have to kind of learn it, one by one. And so I wanted to say that, looking back, I wish I could learn how to ride a bicycle at the...
Not trying to reinvent it.
Exactly. And I was reinventing. By the time I reinvented bicycle, I've lost a lot of the time. But then I realized, hey, the bicycle's already there.
It's like another way of saying is reinventing the wheel.
So it's a best way to, I always say it's the best way to learn from somebody else. And everybody wants to be the best. And I say, hey, look, you want to be the best. Use the any program. Let's say, learn how to type. Right? But I can type, let's say, 200 words a minute, and I don't know if I can do that, but
it's a lot.
But you see, if you want to be the best, then learn how to type 201 words, and that's where you're going to get the edge in this world.
So I've noticed with what you were telling me is a lot of times, even when you were young selling cherries or blueberries, you were learning things that you implement now without knowing it. And then even when you were flipping burgers or pushing carts, you were learning things that you later on used in business. Now, going into your first business venture, how did you transition from not knowing that you were learning things to become a businessman? When did you transition and start to focus on, I want to become a businessman? Or when did you go into that stage of working on your first business?
Yeah, so I remember I was 21 years old, and I was working for one company, and that company all of a sudden did not pay me for 2 different jobs. I was a subcontractor.
What were you doing?
I was installing countertops.
So construction.
Yeah, construction, yeah. And the contract that I was working for, he did not pay me for a long time. And all of a sudden, I received a call from another contract that I knew before. He said, hey, you want to do a job for me? And I said, sure, I can do it. But he said, hey, you have to be a registered business. And I said, what is that? So he said,
so you really didn't know anything?
I had no idea. So he said, and it's one of the best guys that I knew in my life. His name is Tom Lennon from Cincinnati. And he said, here's what you got to do. Go to Ohio Secretary, file for
an LLC.
LLC. And I said, okay, I've done it. He's like, okay, next thing I'm going to send you a contract. But before I send you a contract, you have to have employer identification number. I'm like, what is that? So this guy walked me through how to establish all of that stuff. And I was doing that, and I was thinking, hey, it's just going to be a very short thing. I'm just going to do this job, and I'm just going to go on.
And to go back to that other contractor?
Well, somebody else, because that contract was not paying.
Okay, but you weren't planning to continue with your own business?
No, I was not planning whatsoever. I just wanted really to do this one job. So finally, I got everything established, and I came to do the job in Cincinnati. So Tom, he's like, well, Victor, this is what you can do. This is how you need to submit invoicing and everything like that. And then once everything, all the puzzles start coming together, and the next thing he's like, well, can you do another job for this other guy? And then for this guy and this, and next thing I know, I remember my first job was in May, and then by the end of that year, I had 12 employees working for me.
Wow.
And my heads were spinning. I was losing sleep because I had no idea what to do. Sometimes I was even afraid to go to the job site, because the moment people saw me how young I was, and especially with this older generation and contractors that were looking at me like, you as a young kid, I'm not going to trust you with my job. So I was trying to do everything over the phone, and then sign and then go show myself, and then people like, hey,
when it was too late to
yes, and
bail.
people's like, oh my goodness, you're so young. I'm like, well, what were you thinking? It's like, well, the way you talk, you make it sound like you're 50. I'm like, not yet. But I think the best key is always to find that niche where you are needed. And it's a lot of time I said from beginning that you want to create an opportunity.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a perfect timing.
Perfect time, perfect place.
Perfect place, and you surround yourself with the proper people, and everything comes together. And all of a sudden, from one single job, 2 years later, I had about 64 people working for me. And from one trade, I grew and I started doing very big multi-million-dollar jobs when I was 22, 23, that I could never even dream of doing, just from one single thing. And the best thing, when looking back on it, I want to say, it was the best thing that I was not scared, that I was willing to risk it. And because I could get said, hey, you know what, it's scary, I don't know how to do it. And that would kept me from everything what I am today. If you are an entrepreneur, if you want to be in a business, you have to remember, never be scared, always take that risk. And surround yourself with the people who's going to help you. And even sometimes I said, okay, it's no problem to surround the people who's going to kind of stab you in the back. As long as you know that they're going to stab you in the back. Because
otherwise they'd be lying to you and you don't know that you're messing up, and they're just not telling you.
Because all my life, or all of my business life, I always was thinking and saying, okay, when it's going to happen? When is somebody is going to start chipping away from me? And when you anticipating that, then you are prepared. When sometimes people in this bubble said, okay, nothing's going to happen, I'm the best business, and all of a sudden you see their empire or their business collapse, because they were not anticipating that people's going to come in and chip away from them. Because we're in a business, and business is like you're a shark in an ocean. And sometimes it's very bloody.
Yeah, the red ocean, blue ocean.
Exactly, yes.
So to go back a little bit, you're 21 years old. You are working construction for some other guy. He doesn't pay you. And before you know it, you are doing a job of your own. And then you have 12 employees. And then eventually even 64 within another year. So what was that? What happened with you? What changed? Where you stopped trying to go back to your contractor and working for them, and you decided, I'm going to do this as my own business? What was the shift? What changed?
The shift was when one day or one evening I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I told myself, it's either I can chase this one guy who owes me a little money, or I can forget. And I usually say, when my wife asks me, like, what are you going to do? I usually say, I'm just going to drink cold water. And after that cup that I'm going to drink, it's over. I'm going to move on. And that's what I did. I said, I'm going to move on. And here's the opportunity. And think about it. That was 2005, 2006. The business was booming. The construction was booming at that time. And, when looking back right now, that was one of the best decisions that I've done. The best decision, sometimes you have to drink that cup of cold water. And after that, move on.
Just move on?
Move on, yes.
Because it's gonna cost you more to
exactly
dwell on your past than to move on and just forget about it and learn, but move on. And
I usually joke and I said, hey, I'm gonna sign a contract, and people are like, but who? I'm like, hey, I'm gonna sit in front of the mirror and I'm gonna sign it with myself. This is the point that I'm not coming back. I'm always gonna go forward.
So you saw that there was opportunity out there, that you could make a lot more and have a lot more success working on your own than working for somebody, and then it just kind of made sense for you to go full time.
Yeah, but you see, I think right now looking back, if that person was smart enough, he could have kept me there. With the right incentive and with the right opportunity, I would probably have no need to open the business. And everything that what I've done in the past, I would have probably bring a lot of business to this guy. But unfortunately, he decided that little money is more important at that time than the whole future ahead of him.
I heard this saying where it's a lot harder to make your first 10 or even $100,000 than it is to go from 100,000 to your first million. Would you say that's true, or what would you say about that?
Well, I think it's maybe different, or maybe maybe something like, it depends where you at and what business. Because I've been in many different businesses. I fail big and I win big. So to create that first $100,000 for me was not that difficult. Because when you start thinking about it in construction, when I started with 12 employees, or just me myself, I was working, and a lot of people don't realize that when business persons start working like me, I was on the job site day and night. I was working 17 hours a day. Physically, not just filling the paper. I was physically. I had a little computer. I had a little printer that I was printing papers in my truck, and signing them, scanning them through my little computer and then sending back. Before the technology, before a lot of the things that we had, that was back 2005, 2006, 2007. So by looking back, there is a lot of things that I could have done with today's technology. Would be so much easier. And to make money, I don't think, it never been a purpose for me to say, okay, I'm going to open business to make $100,000 or 200 or $1 million. I did not even realize when my business turned the first million.
Really?
Because you have to remember, in the construction business, a lot of the money that you make, a lot of the money, but it takes a while for them to pay you. And by the time they pay you, you've done many more jobs, but you have to continue pay people. And that's, you kind of losing the the value of the money because you never have it. And end of the year, when you file the taxes, all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I made so much money. Where's the money? Well, it's outstanding. It's going to be paid next year.
Oh, okay.
So it was always kind of turn around for me. So it was never the focus for me to make, there was never a figure. And, through downtimes, when you don't focus on money, it's so much easier for you to go through your downtimes and say, okay, no problem. I'm just going to get up. Because a lot of the people, when you focus on the money and then all of a sudden you reach that goal and then you drop down, it feels bad.
So there's a bigger purpose than just money. And I think that goes back to what you mentioned, not so much focusing on yourself, but focusing on working hard and doing what you're doing, and then doing that well, and then it comes back to you eventually.
Oh, yeah. Because you see, I always said it's not important how much money I make today. It's very important how much money I'm going to make tomorrow. So, because today it's basically in my hands, but today is the day that I can prepare myself for the future, for tomorrow, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. That's the day, because I cannot prepare myself yesterday, or I cannot do anything tomorrow yet. So that's why today is the most important. So prepare yourself today for 5 days ahead, 10 days, or even 5 years.
So if you could touch a little bit on how exactly do you plan ahead, 10 years ahead? Or how do you imagine yourself 10 years in advance and work towards that?
So I always the key for me, if I'm going to set something for myself money-wise, I know I'm going to fail. Because it's either I'm going to reach that goal or I'm not going to reach that goal. It doesn't really matter, because when I set it today, it will change by the time I reach it. So I always set myself a goal for me personally. For me personally, where I want to be as a businessman, or as a father, as an entrepreneur. So it does not, the money is not attached to me. So for example, one of my goals is I have a set goal when I want to retire. And it doesn't matter at that time when I'm going to reach that point. I just have a goal to retire. So it's either I'm gonna have a lot of money or I'm not gonna have a lot of money. It's all depends, on the economy and things like that. But you have to remember, like, if you're gonna set a goal for you personally, that's how you can reach it. So if I'm gonna set my goal as an entrepreneur, yes, I can tell myself, okay, I want to have 15 businesses. I want to have 20 businesses. It doesn't really matter because it's not the count of how many businesses you're going to have. I'm going to say, okay, in 15 years or let's say 5 years from now, I want to be the person who's not going to worry about financially whatsoever.
So instead of thinking of, I want to have this much amount of money, you think about, what's the kind of person that would have this amount of money, and you work towards being that person rather than that money.
I always tell myself, okay, where's the minimum amount of money that I need? And if I have the minimum, then it's always easier to go from minimum to maximum. But if you maximize everything right away, then it's so hard to go backwards, so hard to go to the minimum.
So you mentioned that in 22, you became a millionaire. You were able to do these construction projects, but you're not 22 anymore. You're a little bit older than that. So fast forward 10 years, how did you go from being a contractor on a construction site to what you are now?
Fast forward, it's not going to be that easy to do it. Well, the moment I start making a little bit of money, and after a while in the business, when I start settling down with the business itself, when I start generating some money that was sitting in my account, I will start looking for an opportunity. And when I realized when I'm looking for opportunity, I made a big mistake in my life, and I said, okay, I'm gonna start looking for opportunity play sales. I'm not in the field that I'm at. So I opened...
Not in your level of expertise.
Yes, so I opened Ace Hardware store. I failed big, but I learned so much. The amount of money that I lost is crazy with that business.
So I want to ask you a question. So if you made this investment in Ace Hardware, I think this is a very big point for people that might be listening. It was basically a failure on the outside, but what it seems like from your perspective, you don't consider it a failure because you said you learned a lot. Do you think that's true? Do you think if you'd go back in time, would you change that?
If I would change it, I don't think I could get to where I'm at right now, because the failure with the Ace Hardware store, it was a platform or build up for me that was a step up for me to say, okay, the stuff that I learned dealing with that, it created the opportunity to have a trampoline park. In a sense, not directly, but indirectly, because the things that I have learned, how to take care of the customers, how to, hire employee, what's the quality that I need to look for, how to find, suppliers, and all of those things just create the opportunity for me and a platform for a next level.
So in the face of that kind of adversity or challenge, you were forced to kind of upgrade yourself, and then coming through that, or breaking through that moment, hence the name of the video series. Yes. But when you broke through that, you came out stronger with a different perspective, and you can actually now, I guess, see new opportunities where you didn't see them earlier.
Oh yeah, because you see, if I never dreamed that I'm going to have a trampoline park, and when I opened a first trampoline park, I was not even sure if I'm going to make it. But seizing the opportunity, when I saw the opportunity that I can do this, then I'm like, okay, why let somebody else do it? And that's what kind of drove me, and learning how to deal with the landlord and everything else through my failure in Ace Hardware, in another supply company, in fitness club, and many other things. Because I could have stopped there and I could have said, what, I'm gonna retreat. I'm gonna go back to my construction. That's where I feel comfortable, and I'm just gonna stay there. Because with every single new step that I made, with a lot of failures, I still kind of went out of my comfort zone, went out of my comfort box where I was, okay, I'm really good in construction, I could have stayed there. But I still kept on trying, and end of the day, or right now, I'm looking back and said, okay, every single fail adds something to where I'm become today, not only in the sense of business, but in the sense of creating opportunity for myself today.
So you started your construction business a little bit before the fall of 2008. And then, of course, you mentioned the Ace Hardware, and I'm sure you had a lot of other moments where you had to fail. What did you do to overcome this failure, knowing the uncertainty of a new investment, like the trampoline parks, which you have a couple of them? How do you face this failure? I've heard some people say that when you imagine the worst case scenario and you agree with the worst case scenario, that I can live through that. That's one way to overcome failure. How did you overcome that?
Well, I think it's very difficult and challenging for people to open a new business and go to the bank and ask a lot of money for it.
A loan.
Yes. So when you have a loan, you have so much more to worry about it. Like for me, when I went and opened my first Ace Hardware store, and that was the only one. So when I opened without a loan. So when I lost everything, I could turn around and said, okay, that was a good experiment, or that was a bad experiment, and here's what I learned. I'm not going to repeat it. And then I did several other things exactly the same way. So I was never, when I opened a business, I was never jeopardizing the well-being of my family or financial stability of my family. And that was the key always for me. Yes, eventually I started getting big loans to do a trampoline park. But at that time, I was already at the point to say, okay, even though I'm going to risk it, I will never jeopardize stability of my family.
So it's always about when you do invest and you have to put a big portion of your livelihood at risk, you're never doing it in a way where you can't kind of bounce back. You're always giving yourself room to kind of overcome it.
Oh yeah, because the breakthrough, it's gonna come. When you open the business and you're gonna have that breakthrough and you're gonna be very successful. Just think about if you have a lot of luggage behind you, it will take
like a lot of loans.
Yes, it's gonna take you a lot longer to break through. It's gonna take you a lot longer to start making that money. The little you have, the more you're gonna keep. So in that sense, with everything that I've done, I was always trying to say, okay, how much I have to risk and how much I'm gonna gain. What is it today for me and what's gonna happen tomorrow? And everybody said, hey, always keep that exit strategy for anything you do. But for me, it was a little bit different. I always kept the exit strategy, and my only one thing that was said, if I lose, where I have to start it again. And that was my exit strategy. So when I risked it, I told myself, okay, if I lose it, I could start at ground zero. I cannot fall lower than that.
So it was, you would see what the possibility of failure was. Perhaps you'd lose this or that. And then you think about, well, if that happened, can I live with that? And can I live through it? And then if you say you can because of your skills, then you know that you've already gone through this challenge, you can do it again.
Oh yeah, and you can always try the same thing. And I think a lot of the times, like, people try and fail, and they always in the same field. For me, it was a little bit different. I tried one thing, I failed, and I'm gonna say, you know what? I don't feel comfortable in that field. I'm gonna move to something else. And I finally zero in on something that I was able to grow and make it better and diversify myself. In that way, I still have my construction business. If something's gonna happen and I'm gonna say, hey, where is my ground zero? That would be the construction business. I can just fall.
You know it.
Yes, I can fall back. Even though I had downsized my business through the years, I do very, very little right now. Not because there's no jobs, but I keep it that as a cushion if I have to fall back.
So it sounds like you weren't ever afraid to fail. You were trying new things, and you knew that even those failures, they would teach you something to help you go to the next level.
You never want to fail. You never expect that you're going to fail. But when you see, and for me it was, I think one of my character is I want to go all the way to the end. And when I knew that my business is failing, I was always still trying to do the best I can, even to the last day that when I closed the door. It didn't matter for me. I said, hey, I'm just going to fail. You know what? I don't care. Just whatever's going to happen. It was still the attitude. That's the key. You do the best you can to the last moment of that business.
And you learned that lesson flipping burgers.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you two more things. One is, going back, maybe to somebody like my age or even younger, what would you say to your younger self if you were to go back in time to give advice, knowing that you're going to go through these things? What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think the world has changed so much that what I was relying on something, 15 years ago is not no more there. And I think if I would tell myself today, first thing I would say, hey, go get an education. Even though I've never finished the college, and maybe I'm making way more money than any other age, people like me that went to the college. But that's not the point. It's not the point of making money. When you graduate, it's the best thing that you can set up for yourself. And with the education, you can go a little bit further than the guy before you. That would be the one thing. Second thing I would tell my younger one is surround yourself with the people that you can follow. And the main focus when you follow people, it's not what to learn from them. It's more observation and seeing their attitude and seeing their ability to change, to adapt to different circumstances. Because you can learn their tricks, but that will be not your tricks. But when you're gonna learn how to behave in a situations, that's gonna help you much, much more. So I always go with the key thing is attitude. And you're gonna hear a bunch of speeches on YouTube and everywhere else, how to behave in proper behavior and your attitude. Yes, the problem is it's not yours. Because when it's yours, you're gonna live through it and you're gonna come out. That's gonna be your breakthrough. So that would be the second thing. Surround yourself with people who will be able to lead you, who's going to be able to show you how to change, how to adapt with your attitude, in different circumstances.
Thank you so much, Victor. There's a lot of wise words I can learn myself. I'm sure a lot of people else also can learn. So one more thing I wanted to do, there's a little game we play.
Okay.
I'm going to say 5 words, one at a time, and all you have to do is say the first word that comes to your mind when you hear this word. The only rule is that you can't say the same thing twice.
Okay.
So the first word is family.
Happiness.
Foundation.
Base.
Legacy.
History.
Failure.
Opportunity.
And money.
Not important.
Thank you so much, Victor. I really appreciate you coming on here. It was amazing to hear your story. I know you from growing up a little bit, but I've never seen this side of your story. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, didn't you enjoy that? Please make sure to like and subscribe because it's going to help us a ton as we continue to make more episodes. If you absolutely hated watching this video and you don't want to hear another successful entrepreneur tell their breakthrough story, make sure to dislike and leave me a negative comment so I can read it right before I go to bed because it's going to make my day. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.